Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Let's Talk Automotive, episode 14. In tonight's show, we've got the latest news.
And we've also got a special guest, Les McMaster from Right to Repair.
And then we're going to have some game time, and we are also going to see how batteries and alternators work in how things work. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Let's Talk Automotive. So how are you doing, Pete?
Yeah, no, strong, can't complain.
Lockdown level, whatever the case may be?
Level 3.0.24.
and lockdown, what is it called? Curfew's back and whatever the case is.
Yeah, so we better get on with the show.
We better go. Listen, let's get into the news. First up, let's get into this week's latest news.
Yes.
All right, so we're checking out the Defender. The Defender launch.
You, the lucky bugger, had the unique privilege of, despite the new Defender being a virtual launch, you had some behind-the-scenes access.
Absolutely, just because we know some people that know some people. Yeah, virtual launch, but let's let, this was the virtual launch. So after the actual video went out at 4 o'clock, they had pre-recorded stuff. They had a virtual press Q&A session, and that's what happened there. So yeah, very interesting. Cool. Groundbreaking from the guys at Land Rover, Jaguar, South Africa. But let's have a look at the vehicle quickly. Geez, Pete, what an unbelievably beautiful car.
I know, I'm actually very jealous of you. I'm probably not going to talk to you for the rest of the week, but it's an amazing vehicle. I think perhaps one of the things that was controversial with the new Defender was people, sort of the hardcore fans, were worried that the new Defender was going to lose its DNA.
Yes.
But ultimately, if we have a look at the package, what they've done is modernized this vehicle to incredible levels. So the technology on the vehicle is incredible. The DNA is still there. And in fact, Land Rover are saying that this is probably one of their best 4x4s ever from a capability point of view.
Sure. The one thing that stood out for me and shocked me was the price, man.
I think we've got to get used to expensive cars like this. You know, with all the toys in them, the technology is unreal. But if you have a look at the competitors for the Defender, they're also in those kind of price ranges. So I think it's just a mindset that we've got to get used to these kind of vehicles costing over R1 million.
Well, you're definitely getting what you pay for.
For sure. I mean, and I've been astounded by some of the features and the cool,
what's your favorite?
The cool technology. My favorite, I think, is the clear sight technology that they've got. So, I mean, just to explain maybe to the viewers out there, this is cameras that they've positioned on the vehicle that actually make the body of the vehicle disappear. So when you 4x4ing, you see the actual
road,
the terrain that you're on. You see the wheels turning, and you don't see any of the vehicle. You know, you almost got to make sure that you've got your own clothes on because everything is clear.
Listen, let's move on to Formula One. Yes, and third race, and it was filled with. Let's not say what it was, but anyway, Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes show.
It is. It's unfortunately, I think it's becoming too much of a one-horse race once again. I was a little bit disappointed that Valtteri had such a poor start. I think that he's really the only real challenger to the crown this year with Lewis Hamilton. So I was a bit sad to see that. But again, Max Verstappen
had a little bit of a oopsie.
Can you believe it?
In a warm-up lap, and these oaks put that car back together in 10, 15, 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Back on track again, and he finishes second in a car that is seriously behind the Mercedes-Benz.
Crazy. Listen, Racing Point and Lance Stroll surprised you in fourth?
I think they did. You know, I know that there's a lot of controversy around it being the pink Mercedes, but I think one of the lessons that I took away from Hungary was, are we underrating Lance Stroll as a driver? And I know he's there because his dad owns the team, and I think a lot of people kind of view him as a driver who's paying for his seat to be there. But I think that he's showing against a serious teammate that he's proper.
Okay, then one thing that stood out for me was Ferrari being lapped. Did you ever think that you're going to see that?
Not unless they had a flat tire or something like that. But I mean, just on pure pace, being lapped like that is very sad to see. And I think that maybe we need to ask questions of the FIA in terms of, have they taken their I suppose I think we'll ask Sasha this later, but I think has the FIA taken things too far with Ferrari in terms of making them come back on their engine development?
Agreed. And then just the last little photo that we have of Lando Norris. How's this okay? I really like this guy. I think he's got a bright future. There's working on the car, disassembling and getting it ready to be moved to the next venue. Unbelievable.
Crazy. I mean, listen, I know they've cut back on salaries, but I mean, does he have to have part-time work now?
Okay, now, interesting thing I just want to show you quickly. After 3 rounds in 2019, this was the standings, okay? And then this is what it's looking like now after 3 rounds in 2020. Interesting to see those pink guys over there.
Yeah, so I think they've swapped places with Ferrari by the looks of things. So, I mean, there's Ferrari languishing right down at the bottom of the pile.
Crazy.
And the McLaren's doing well.
Hopefully, there's a new appointment at Ferrari.
There is a great...
A
new old appointment, because one of the technical shake-ups is bringing back Rory Byrne.
Yes.
And Rory Byrne, you must remember, was the designer of the Ferrari during the Schumacher days.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, a South African boy.
Awesome. Okay, now, my favorite part of this weekend past, MotoGP back.
Oh, yes.
Checking the bikes. This is proper racing, and it was filled. Mr. Quartararo getting his first win. Look at that face. Getting his first podium. There he is, telling everybody to quiet down.
Yeah, I think a lot of pressure on him because he's been there and thereabouts.
Yes. He's impressive, eh?
Absolutely impressive. I was also hugely proud of what our boy did, Brad Binder.
Check, we've got a photo of Brad going around the corner. Look at that South African boychi in MotoGP. Did you ever think you're going to see that proper?
I tell you, it's been a long time. And you know, he set the fastest lap of the race.
He did.
So despite having a little off, he still came back nicely to 12th position.
But a weekend filled with offs and crases and crashes and Alex Rins. Yes, we've got a photo of the oak in his sling. But I'll get to that now. Let's just look at Marc Marquez's, again, one of the best saves I've ever seen, going off at that fourth corner.
150 k's an hour.
Crazy. But this is the crash. After getting back on the track, working his way back into that third position and then gunning for second at the same corner, this crash happened. That's him and his x-ray. And I've got another picture of him after his operation. Yep. And the news broke today that Ak has been declared fit to race this weekend.
I mean, is he a human being at the end of the day? That is incredible. And that part of the arm to break apparently is seriously sore.
Yes.
So, you know, they had to give him a few drugs to calm him down, to just even have the x-ray done. So, incredible.
Not only him, Alex Rins and Carl Crutchlow is actually also racing this weekend. I've just heard. Hopefully that was the right information. But
well, imagine if these boys played soccer. They'd never have any problems.
Well, that was your news for the week. A week full of eventful events. Let's move over to our guest of the week.
All right, and here we have Les McMaster from Right to Repair. Welcome, Les.
Hi there, nice to be with you guys.
Excellent, excellent. Listen, Les, the concept of Right to Repair has been around on everybody's lips for a while now. So we thought it would be awesome to get you on. I mean, you, as I understand it, are one of the original founders of Right to Repair. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the organization and what some of the aspirations of Right to Repair are.
Okay, so we started off with the Right to Repair in 2010. Actually, 28, if I had to go a little bit further. It all started as a result of the aftermarket workshops being sidelined when it came to coding of parts. And we saw that, through the years since the 1990s, where more and more parts were being coded, and we didn't have access to that coding. And we saw and realized that as we went along, it could eventually be the death knell for the aftermarket workshops, because what was happening, and I speak from that from a forward point of view, that the workshops were being, you would get a vehicle into a workshop, a gearbox controller would be faulty, you could diagnose it, you could tell the customer the vehicle controller was faulty, but when it came to replacing the part, firstly, you're not allowed to buy it, you can't code it, so the customer would then go and buy it from the dealer, he would bring it to a workshop where you would fit it, and then it had to go back to the dealer to be coded to the VIN, and make the part operable.
Yeah, I think maybe it's important. Sorry, Liz, if I can just jump in there, just to make it clearer for our viewers, that these days the parts actually each are assigned to a particular control unit, and they have chassis recognition. So they have to be coded according to that chassis, otherwise the part will automatically switch off. I suppose that's from a theft protection point of view, but it makes it much more difficult for independent workshops then to work on the vehicles.
And of course, more and more parts were being linked to the vehicle security. So they started to do gearbox controllers, braking systems. And we started to see all kinds of funny things happening in the market, where a braking system, ABS pump, for instance, would be faulty. But that part was so expensive, and because it was impossible to fit that part and code it, we started seeing that the second, the third, and the fourth owner would be bypassing these systems. So you would have a vehicle on the road, traveling quite legal, but when it came to an emergency braking system, the ABS wouldn't work. You remember that car was designed for an ABS braking system.
Yes.
And now that ABS braking system is now inoperable, because the part was so expensive and had to be coded by a dealer who had, 1,000 rand an hour labor charge.
Yeah.
And we sort of saw this happening, and we decided that at some stage, and like Europe, we saw that we needed to, firstly, to get access to coding, access to equipment, access to all the tooling that we needed to be able to work on these cars going forward.
And training,
and that's
of course,
how we
as well.
started the Right to Repair.
And the training. There's going to be training.
Before we carry on there, I just want to jump in and welcome the viewers on RaceDay.tv, FS Media, and FS Auto. And obviously, guys, this is a very relevant topic. Everybody's got a car. So if you have a question, please pop it into the comments below. And if you have a question for Les or for Pete or for ourselves here, just pop it in and we'll discuss it and ask Les. He's the expert.
Awesome, thank you. So Les, you guys have been around for 10 or 12 years, and we've seen a few draft regulations that have been published. When do you think the actual legislation is going to be promulgated?
Well, the final draft is there, and the last of the comments closed a month ago, and the new code or regulation will be promulgated probably, we think, by the end of the year, because there are certain little aspects, and certain OEMs have come with additional comments to the Competitions Commissioner, who we originally lodged the complaint with. And he's taken it up, and they were responsible for the drafting of the legislation. So we see that if all things go well, that by the end of the year we should have that fully operable.
Okay, wow, that's awesome. Because again, it's been going on for a while.
Yes,
So by the end of the year, I think that's going to be proper. Les, another question that I've got is in terms of what the draft regulations talk about with respect to independent service providers. So the independent workshops, for example.
Yeah.
What sort of membership or bodies are those independent workshops going to be part of? Would they be part of, for example, the retail motor industry, or can anybody that's got a workshop be part of the Right to Repair program?
Well, anybody who's got a workshop can be, but you must remember that are you equipped to be able to do it? That is the main thing. Yeah. And it says the right to repair, which says the consumer has the right to have his vehicle repaired where he wants to. But we don't see consumers like sort of running away from dealerships and going to aftermarket workshops to do servicing. You must remember with the before the right to repair and the legislation and the code and the draft, a vehicle was sold with a motor plan. It was built into the price of the vehicle, and when we as a body joined the Right to Repair Coalition in Europe, which was made up of Australia, South Africa, United States, Brazil, Poland, and a number of the other countries, and of course the whole of Europe, they told them that we in South Africa are selling vehicles with a built-in service plan.
Yep.
The Right to Repair says that at the point of sale, the service plan must be added on. So the vehicle doesn't come with a built-in price. The vehicle has a price, and when the vehicle is sold, the service plan is negotiated with the client. Now, we see and we know, as it has happened in the States and in Europe, where these plans are available, they negotiate at the point of sale.
Okay. So they're unbundled from the price of the vehicle.
Yes.
And we know, that there are it's between 40 and 70,000 rand that's added onto the price of a vehicle. And if you think of the 40 or the 70,000 rand, there's HP charges onto that because it's all in as part of the HP. So it can be quite a bit of money that you're actually paying for 3 services maximum.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next question there.
Yeah, so obviously one of the things with Right to Repair is that the warranty of the vehicle will still remain intact even if you don't go to a franchise dealership. So the question I've got there is, if a vehicle is under warranty and warranty work is required to be performed, who now pays for that? Is it the customer? Does the manufacturer still pay that independent workshop to perform that work? How's that going to pan out?
So it's actually very simple, and this is how it works in the States and in the EU, where it's legislated. You buy the vehicle, you can service it in an aftermarket workshop, but should some part go wrong, for instance, a drivetrain part, a gearbox, it will still go back to the OEM, who will be responsible for the repair under warranty.
Okay.
All that will then be required is that the servicing that was done didn't directly contribute to the failure. That's where the whole little controversy is about how it's going to work.
And that actually leads on to my next question. So a customer brings in their vehicle to an independent workshop, work is performed on it, a non-original part, and I think this is the other area that would be of interest to customers, is that you can use non-original parts as well. So you don't have to use the original OEM part. But let's say this non-original part is now fitted to a vehicle and something goes wrong and it causes consequential damage. Where does the responsibility lie now in terms of who picks up the tab?
Okay, so what happens? The failure of the vehicle must be attributed to that non-original part. So, if, for instance, you fitted an oil filter during the service procedure, and that oil filter failed and caused engine damage, then of course the manufacturer is not responsible for that repair. But if there was an engine damage and all the correct parts were fitted, the correct oils were fitted, the manufacturer still has to prove that by fitting an original or better part than the original one, that was the contributing factor. Yeah. So the manufacturer has to prove that the part that was fitted actually contributed to the failure.
Okay. Yeah, I must say, it's going to be very interesting to see the interplay between the OEMs, the franchise dealers, and the independent workshops. You must have, over this last period of time, really come up with a lot of resistance from the main players in the franchised environment. So maybe you can share a little bit of your experience with that.
Just remember, the franchise dealer is as much a victim of the OEMs as the aftermarket workshops, because we were in Germany and we had a failure on our navigation system, and we stopped at a remote dealership, and in my broken German that I have been speaking to all these years to German people, I said to them, my navigation system's not working. Can you please have a look? And as we turned around, we saw that they had a Volkswagen in a Mercedes-Benz workshop.
Yeah.
And I said to him, wow, coming from a Mercedes-Benz background, I said to him, is that allowed? He said, oh yeah, we have the right to repair. We can service any vehicle we want to. In South Africa, if you have a Mercedes-Benz dealership or a BMW dealership, you will not have any other dealer, any other make of vehicle in your workshop except what you are representing. The right to repair is going to free that up, because now you will see that dealerships will now own aftermarket workshops, and that's happening. That's a reality.
That's very interesting.
They will be able to service. They will be able to service other makes in their workshop if they feel that they are qualified enough to service those vehicles, which I think most dealerships actually are, and they'll be, which is good for their profitability, especially now in these times, and it opens up a whole new service economy for those workshops.
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, I think that's right, and I think that maybe the message is, first of all, this is an absolute win for the consumer because they've just given so much more choice now. But I think that the franchised operators don't necessarily need to be threatened by this, and if they just educate themselves on the actual provisions in the Act and the regulations, that there's an opportunity there for them as well. So that's great. So Les, thank you so much for your time. I don't know if there's any last things that you want to add, but
hold on.
Have
you scared of something? Because Les is definitely staying on.
It's that game.
Right, guys. Thank you, Les. I appreciate your time, but it's game time. All right, guys, like I've explained to you, and the viewers back at home, you can also join us, please, for this game. We're going to show you a partial photo of a car, and you guys must guess what it is. Please shout your name if you know the answer, and I'll come to you and see if you are correct. All right, guys, let's jump right into it. Here's your first one. Les, what is that?
That looks like a Lamborghini.
No, unfortunately not. Do you want to have a try, Peter?
I would have said that is a McLaren SLR. Look, not the SLR. It looks like the McLaren, the original McLaren.
Unfortunately not.
No.
So no, that is the Koenigsegg CCXR Chavita.
Okay.
All right, guys. So 0-0. Let's go into the second slide.
Yes, Peter. That's a Lamborghini Veneno.
Peter, you are correct. You were just one too early, Les, with the Lamborghini.
Yeah, absolutely.
What an unbelievable car. Just for interest's sake, that car's price is $4.5 million.
I'll take two.
All right, let's... Oh, Sasha got that one, right? Sasha's watching with us. Guys, let's move on to the third one. This is very difficult. I'm very sorry, guys. I can tell you that this car costs $3.4 million.
Sure.
Les, do you want to have a chance? So go there. Do you recognize that by any chance?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
Is
Peter?
But
Sasha's got it again.
Is that that strangely worded one with that's named after a letter of the alphabet, a W?
It's called
W Motors.
It's the W Motors Lycan Hypersport.
well done.
All right, guys. So at this stage, it's 1-0 to Peter.
No, two.
Why?
Because I got
Two,
that
two.
one
No,
right.
you didn't get that
You got it
right,
right.
man. Let's move on to the fourth one. Let's see if you guys can get this one right.
That's an Audi.
You need to shout your name, Les.
Peter. I'm going to
Peter?
say that's a Bugatti, and I would say that's the Veyron.
That is correct. Peter,
Oh,
well
there's
done.
the badge.
That is
But it
the
probably does
Bugatti.
have Audi lights.
It does. It does very
Well,
much so.
in all respects, it's an Audi. Eh?
That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
All right, let's move on
Do I
to the next
do I
one.
get a half a point for that?
I'll give you half a point, Les. Let's move on to the next one.
Peter,
I'm gonna, yes?
I would say that's a Ferrari, and I would say it's either the it's a 488,
No.
458.
No.
It's a Ferrari.
It's a Ferrari. I'm going to give you half a point for that. It's the Ferrari F60 America.
Okay.
And that vehicle, by the way, is $2.5 million. Interesting vehicles. Okay, the last one. What is the score now?
It's 3
No, it's
and a half.
three
It's
and,
three.
2.5.
Three, two off. 3 2 off. 3 2 off.
Let's
Les,
move.
I
Let's
don't
move
often
on.
win at this game, buddy. So I've got to make sure that I can take my half points when I get them.
Let's move on to the last one. Let's try this one.
Sure.
Anybody want to take a chance?
Is it? It's not a Ford GT40.
I
Is
think
it?
you like this car. I can't believe that you
Yeah.
don't get this one right. You've actually spoke to me about this car.
I did. The Koenigsegg.
That's correct. Okay, too late. I'm not going to give you that point.
Why?
Sasha got it
Out
again.
of my league.
Sasha, I'm going to get you on the show for this game because Peter needs some help.
Desperately.
We need some normal cars.
yeah.
Les, thank you so much for joining us and giving us the insights into Right to Repair.
Yep.
It was very, very nice talking to you. And keep us updated as we go along. If there's any questions from customers or consumers, we'll definitely pass them on.
Thank you so much, Les. It was
Thank you
really
very much.
informative, and good luck. And let's see this act get promulgated as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
All right. It's that time. It's that time of the night. Not yet. All right. Let's see what's happening. Hey! Check who's here with us. Sash, how are you doing?
Hey guys, man, listen, sorry I missed you a little bit earlier, but it's just been a bit crazy. I love that game. I want to play that game.
I'm glad you like it. I'm terrible at it, and I think Fanie gets a lot of pleasure out of seeing me squeal. I can't seem to get these cars right.
While we have you on the line, Sash, we've already discussed in our layman's terms what was the F1 last weekend. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you know what? I take my hat off to Max Verstappen and his team for getting the car onto the grid in time.
Insane.
Without him, it clearly would have just been a walk in the park for Mercedes 1-2. But at least we had a little bit of action behind Lewis Hamilton. Lewis was on another planet, and the Mercedes is on another planet. And I fear for the teams when they go to Silverstone on a power track. So
I saw your comments.
Yeah, it's looking very good.
I
Yeah,
saw your
looking very
comments
good
with
for
regards to, and we discussed Ferrari being lapped. What?
Yeah, I honestly believe that if it's dry conditions and we don't have a safety car in Silverstone, I firmly believe that the Haas, the Williams, the Alfa Romeo, and the Ferrari teams will be lapped.
Insane.
And most probably AlphaTauri and everybody else up until themselves.
Insane. Listen, very quickly, We spoke about the MotoGP. I know that you're the F1 king, but yes, that was amazing.
Unbelievable. I mean, I cannot believe that Marc Marquez has been declared fit. I've actually, today, guys, I spoke to an orthopedic surgeon, as well as, you see, I don't know if that X-ray is 100% right.
You don't think that's his?
I don't think that's his.
Okay.
Even an orthopedic surgeon who I spoke to today, Dr. Human, and he said, even with a fracture, yes, it can look minuscule.
Yeah.
He says even a guy and a cyclist, most probably within 2 weeks, a cyclist might be able to get back. He says, but to go and race, on a MotoGP bike again within a week or 5 days or whatever, it's just crazy. So perhaps the injury was not as severe as what we were told, or Marc Marquez, which I firmly believe is not from this planet.
Yeah, well, I keep saying that. But I also just want to remind you guys that when Brad Binder first moved up to Moto2, during the off-season during testing, he had an accident and he broke his arm, which was plated. And I think it was one of his first races in Moto2, he had a tank slapper. And I mean, the forces that he experienced during that actually undid the work that the plate had on his arm. And in fact, he had to miss 2 or 3 races while he got that sorted out again. So,
absolutely
insane.
I
mean, to see where that X-ray there, I'm also, unless they've replaced that bone entirely with the composite or something.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Peter and Fanie. I mean, the guy is superhuman as it is. If he does race this weekend, it'll be magnificent. I just hope he doesn't fall and injure himself and then, do some serious damage. He doesn't really need to take this risk in his life, let's be honest.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, true story.
So tell us about your new blog.
Oh, well, it looks like my picture's going lazy. I think hopefully Fritz.
We got you.
No. I mean, no, I'm busy writing a blog, because on a Thursday we usually have our show after you guys.
Yes.
But we only do it when we have a Grand Prix weekend. So I've just been writing a blog, which I'll post up a little bit later on my website, about trying to explain this whole complication about not being able to just put a new engine into the back of a Ferrari or an Alfa Romeo or a Haas. How complicated the regulations are at the moment. So try and put it in layman's terms as well, so that even I can understand it. Because if I can understand it, then anybody can understand it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be actually very welcome, because it is something that's been on my mind in terms of, we know the FIA took action against Ferrari last season because they were so ahead of the curve. And I was almost wondering 2 things. The first is, why can't Ferrari recover quickly from this? I mean, surely they've got some excellent engineers that could probably fix this right away. And then the second part of that question is, did the FIA not perhaps go too far with Ferrari and is maybe damaging the sport, because there's a lot of Ferrari customers out there in the form of Haas, etc., that are also suffering the consequences?
Yeah, I mean, they're both great questions, Peter. I think, the first one is, I'll answer that in the blog, to sit and explain the complexities of the regulations as to why they can't just go and slap in a new engine in the back of that car. And what the FIA has done together with Ferrari, a lot of people will just go out there and sit and say, well, clearly they were cheating. However, you've got to play devil's advocate and sit there and say, hold on a second, they were doing something or going in a direction that the FIA most probably weren't too happy with, in terms of how it was going to develop in the future. And it is their IP, it is their intellectual property. So that's also information they don't want other teams to know. So that's the story they're going to use. And we see exactly where it transpires. But because of these regulations, they can't go and just develop and help out themselves and their customer teams as well. So it is a complicated situation, but it's so typical of Formula One. If there isn't drama, then it's the greatest soap opera in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Sasha, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your thoughts. Guys, go to his website and check out that new blog. When will it be available, Sash?
Most probably in the next hour or so. But
okay, awesome.
I'll post it up on the race day page as well.
Perfect.
Great.
Thanks
We're
so
looking
much for
forward to your
joining
show.
us.
Thanks,
Thank
Fanie.
you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Peter. Nice to see you guys, man.
Cheers,
You too.
man. Have a
Cheers.
good one.
Cheers, Sash.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Right, so this morning, one of my friends, Keith, also a race day, the bearded Keith,
Yeah.
got to his car and he started his car and nothing.
Flat battery.
Battery. So got me thinking, batteries sort of die when it's cold. What's that about?
Yeah, it's actually basic physics. The colder things get, the more difficult it is for things to move,
Yes.
like you and me. So it certainly happens with electrons. The colder it gets, it's more difficult for those electrons to move. And
Yes.
obviously, electricity is a function of how fast the electrons and how many
Yes.
electrons are moving. So the colder it gets, the less they move, the less charge you have in your battery.
Okay. So let's get into our next segment, how things work, with Professor Peter Viljoen.
Welcome to our next installment on how things work. And today we're going to be taking you through the functions of the battery and the alternator in your car. Now, a lot of people ask, what is it that actually supplies the electrical current to the vehicle? Is it the battery or is it the alternator? And it's actually a bit of both, but it just depends on when we're using each of these. So when we first start the car, naturally that's when we're using the battery. So the battery is what cranks the engine. But once the engine's up and running, actually a lot of the power that is supplied to the electrical system in the vehicle comes from the alternator. Now, when we start to use heavier and heavier consumables like our infotainment systems and the like, then obviously we start to use some of the electricity from the battery itself. So it's a bit of give and take, but ultimately most of it comes from the alternator. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because quite a few times when our battery packs up or when our alternator packs up, it's very difficult for us to diagnose it. And we go out and we spend a lot of money on a new battery when actually it was the alternator or vice versa. So I wanted to take you through a few basic diagnostic steps that you can have a look at. So first things first, if you start the vehicle and it battles to crank over the engine, well, the likelihood is that it's the battery that's at fault. However, if the vehicle is started properly and now you're driving it, and for example, you're driving at night and you start to notice that your headlights are dimming or some of the other functions on the car are not working properly, well, then it's likely that it's the alternator that's at fault. Now, there's a few basic steps that you can do to save yourselves a lot of money if you are starting to experience those symptoms. The first is to simply take your vehicle into your local battery shop and have them do what's called a load test on the battery. So they apply a lot of load on the battery and they can get a reading on whether the battery is at fault or not. If you've ticked that off, then unfortunately it's going to be the alternator. Now, there's another thing that causes batteries to go flat often, and that is the tracking devices that we have on our vehicles. Now, you may not know this, but when your vehicle is switched off, the battery is still being used. We call this a quiescent current draw, and it's normally at about 0.75 amps of draw, and that's just keeping up your control units and charging those little batteries in the control units. But when you stick some advanced tracking device to your vehicle, we can actually ramp up the current, the quiescent current draw, to about 1.75 amps. And in that instance, your battery is going to run flat very, very quickly. It'll be a matter of days if you haven't used the car. So one of the big things to look at is what tracking device you've got on your vehicle if you're constantly having battery problems. All right, so let's have a look at the battery that we currently find in our vehicles and what sort of maintenance that we have to do to make sure that the battery lasts as long as possible. So in the past, you will remember that we had to maintain the levels of our electrolytes in the battery. Well, these days we don't have to. The batteries are fully sealed and therefore maintenance free. So the only bit of maintenance that we really have to do is if our battery goes flat. So most of us have trickle chargers at home that we stick onto the battery to charge it up. Just a bit of a caution over here, don't overcharge the battery for an extended period of time. My rule of thumb is don't go more than 8 hours. And the reason for that is that when you're putting in a whole lot of energy into the battery to charge it, we're creating a lot of heat and we're creating a lot of gaseous discharge. And between those two things, we put the battery at risk of exploding. And that's a place that we don't want to go down. Now, the reality is that if you're having to charge your battery for longer than 8 hours, it's probably time to get a new battery. Now, the interesting thing with batteries in modern vehicles is that currently they are 12-volt batteries. However, that's changing and it's changing rapidly. And the reason for that is that we're starting to see new technologies appearing in the vehicles, from soft hybrids through to the immense number of control units and computers that we're seeing and other electronic components in the vehicle. 12 volts is simply not enough. So we're going to start seeing vehicles, and we already are, with 48 volt batteries. So how long can we expect an average battery to last in a vehicle? Well, all things being equal and under normal operating conditions, we're probably going to get about 4 years lifespan out of a battery. Right, now let's have a look at the alternator. As you can see, the alternator is driven via a belt which is connected directly to the engine over here. And the reason why I highlight that is because an alternator actually consumes a lot of power from the engine. Anything from 2 to 10 kilowatts, actually, depending on the size of the alternator that you have in your vehicle. Now, the importance of that is that there's a lot of work that's been done around the design of alternators to make them less power hungry from the motor itself. So we know that an air conditioning compressor can actually detach its pulley to save a bit of power being consumed by the engine and therefore fuel. And we're now starting to see alternators that have the same ability, where they're actually able to disconnect when they're not in use. Now, another design consideration when it comes to alternators is, of course, cost. These are very, very expensive items to make. And one of the most expensive areas is actually in the winding of the wiring in the alternator itself. So I'm going to show you the two main ways that we wind an alternator. The first is in a star configuration, and the second is in a delta configuration. Now, I'm not going to take you through the engineering behind this. Really, one of the reasons why I wanted to show you this is because the most common way that we wind an alternator is using the star configuration. And what's very cool for me is that it actually represents the flux capacitor on Back to the Future. But nonetheless, this is a much cheaper alternative in terms of how to wind an alternator. We get the most current out of this. And the second thing that's important is that it's very easy to create a neutral point out of this. So just one of the design philosophies behind a modern alternator. Another focus area in the design of the alternator is how we eradicate heat. Believe it or not, there's a lot of energy going through the alternator which generates a tremendous amount of heat. Now, on older alternators, you would have noticed that there was quite a basic fan that was at the back of the alternator that we used to cool the alternator. These days, a modern alternator actually has two sets of cooling fans that are internal, and in fact, there are some vehicles where the alternators are indeed water-cooled. Now, the alternator, as we know it, is about to come to its useful life's end. And the reason for that is that these days, particularly with soft hybrids, we are now starting to see integrated alternators and starter motors. And let me show you how these work over here. So what you'll see is there's no longer an alternator on the side of the engine that's driven by a pulley. The integrated alternator and starter motor is actually between the engine and the gearbox. And those serve two useful functions. So we have a 48 volt battery over here. And when the vehicle comes to a stop, everything switches off. The battery still continues to supply power to all your electronic consumables on the vehicle. But as we pull off, what happens now is that the starter motor gives the engine a little bit of an assist when it pulls off. And in fact, it doesn't stop there. So when you start to accelerate a little bit harder, if there's enough power charged in the battery, this alternator will then give the engine another little bit of assist. And in fact, what we're seeing here is that we can reduce the size of V8 motors down to V6s and still have the same performance on a normally aspirated engine. The other cool thing with this technology is the regeneration properties out of this. So when your foot is off the accelerator, what happens now is the engine converts the starter motor into an alternator, which then recharges this battery over here, and then that loop continues. So exciting stuff to come, and in fact, in future episodes of How Things Work, we're going to talk about hybrids and all the various types of hybrids. So be sure to look out for one of those episodes, and until next time, see you again.
Well, there you go, Keith. Now you know.
Keep your battery charged.
Listen, I just want to mention a couple of guys that's commenting. Barcy Stain says, well done. Your first win on Guess the Car Game. He's very proud of you. Paul van der Vyver says, 93 is a champ. Go Mark Marquez. Peter and Paul Woodward's watching with us. Corin Espich is joining us. Johannes Janssen van Rensburg said his 2006 Nissan 350Z still has his original battery.
Wow, that's amazing, because normally a battery, you can give about a 4-year lifespan.
4 to 5 years,
so that's proper.
Thanks for joining us, guys. That was very nice.
Yeah, awesome. So, Fanie, this week you had insights into the virtual launch of the Defender. Anything coming up for next week?
I just got back from the media handover with the guys from BMW Motorrad, and they showed us the F900R, the F900XR, and also the S1000XR. Unbelievable bikes, and please join us next week, and we've got Vish Singh joining us and doing a little bit of a review on those bikes. We had an unbelievable time with the guys from BMW yesterday. It was unbelievable.
Excellent, and I'm looking forward to Vish's contribution. He's a hell of a character, so I'm pretty sure that's going to be a fantastic segment.
We thought we're passionate about bikes. Let's bring in some bikes as well.
First class.
All right, guys, that was Let's Talk Automotive episode 14. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back here next week, same time, same place. See you then.
Cheers, guys.